Thank you, Cian Corlin. And Taoiseach, there's an air of disbelief about the country and indeed the city that a major economic project by its own rights has not got to go ahead or has been cancelled. And I refer to the cancellation of the 5 Garth Brooks concerts. At a minimum, it's estimated it will cost the city about 50 million. That's only a starting estimate. Many people believe it could be far more significant than a 50 million hit in terms of the economy. And if you look also, 70,000 inward bound guests or purchasers, they were inbound attendees, so it's a huge fillip for the tourism industry. 400,000 fans have had their tickets cancelled and ancillary booking expenses attached to that. You're looking at about 200,000 hotel bookings disrupted. So it is of a very exceptional economic nature by any yardstick. And also the reputational damage that has been done in terms of the capacity of the country and the city to host major events of this kind, because part of our tourism strategy has been all about making Ireland an attractive location for very significant events of this kind. And I know you said last week in Berlin that you hoped everybody could work something out, I think is what you said in Berlin. But the question does, and I just want to make a point, Taoiseach, we had the One Direction concerts, all passed without incident, 3 of them. At no stage, it seems, were the promoters or the GAA told that there wouldn't be any licence given for the 5 concerts. Certainly there was talk about major restrictions, major hurdles, major issues around transportation and security, but at no stage was there a significant indication given that the licences would not be given to them.
Thank you.
And what I want to put to you, Taoiseach, is this. Surely the government should have intervened at some stage in this debacle. Either the Minister for the Environment, the Minister for Tourism, given the enormity of it and its impact and its implications. And I want to ask the question, why didn't the government intervene in a hands-on way? Goodwill alone is not enough. Where there's a will, there's a way out of these situations. And I want to put it to you, Taoiseach, that that's one question I want to put to you. The second question, will you give serious consideration to accepting and give government time to considering Deputy Dooley's legislation in relation to providing a mechanism for appeal and for review by the Minister for the Environment?
Thank you.
And that I think the opposition would support government in moving legislation of that kind, given the significance of the economic implications here. Many hoteliers, restaurant owners, publicans, young people looking for work, I mean, they can't simply believe that the system, that the country can simply almost nonchalantly say, we don't really need that. We don't really need that.
Taoiseach.
Well, I'd be as disappointed as anybody else in the country, Deputy Martin, that Ireland has lost this major musical event with an international and indeed a global artist in many respects. It is true to say that the loss to the economy is of the order of 50 million. It is true to say that 400,000 fans wish to turn up. It is true to say that 70,000 of those were going to travel from abroad to Dublin here. And it's true to say that 200,000 bookings were made for B&Bs, guest houses, hotels and so on. I've had a deluge of contact from people who had bought their tickets, who made arrangements for the day out with their family or their friends or whatever, and the cost to them, of course, which will be refunded now. Why didn't the government intervene here? Well, clearly, Dublin City Council made its decision in accordance with the current planning regulations. And I suppose were government to attempt to say, well, OK, there were 3 concerts already for One Direction, and now you have 5 for another artist. This is outside the agreed parameters. Government would certainly be accused of coming the heavy on an issue like this. I do think that we've had all of these major acts in Ireland before, major outdoor concerts all over the country, from Páirc Uí Chaoimh to Semple Stadium to Limerick to Kilkenny to Dublin, the RDS, and in Croke Park previously, and there weren't any difficulties or hitches with these. So I mean, I do believe that we need to look at how this process actually operates. And I've asked the Minister for the Environment to look at the operational regulations that I think, need to be looked at, with particularly in regard to the timeline requirements for the submission of applications by event organisers for something like this. Secondly, the deciding on such applications by the relevant planning authority in advance of a series of events or concerts like this. And thirdly, the absence of a specific appeals mechanism in regard to decisions made on event licences, though of course judicial review is an option that can be considered there. I think that in the case of the Croke Park issue here, this is an area that we do need to look at. Now, I've seen Deputy Dooley's bill. I know that it's a genuine interest from Deputy Dooley. And as he said himself yesterday, if government wish to look at this, amend it, change it, I will look at it, absolutely. And in the context of the conversations that I've had with the Minister for the Environment about these regulations, let's see, is there something positive that government can actually do here so that this cannot happen again? It's a major loss to the country, to the goodwill and the good feeling of all those fans of Garth Brooks that this is lost, not to mention the hard economic loss to so many people here. So it's a mess, and it's one that there's an issue here that I think we do need to look at. So that's why government didn't intervene. Dublin City Council made its decision based on the planning regulations in place, and in respect of the Deputy's bill, I'll have a look at that and see whether that can be a basis or could be used in some form or other for government to look at these 3 points that I've mentioned here, Deputy.
Taoiseach, first of all, I would put it to you that you have said, and you said yesterday it was badly handled. You're saying it's a shock to the system. The Minister for Arts has said, Mr. Deenan, that it's a major embarrassment, and other ministers are saying somewhat similar. But I think what most people are asking is what's going to be done about it now? Can it be rescued in any shape or form now? And I accept and I welcome the fact that you said you will have a look at Deputy Dooley's legislation. But is that for the long term or is it for right now? Because his legislation is specifically tailored to deal with the issue now of the cancelled concerts in terms of facilitating a review mechanism for the decision that has been taken by the Dublin City Council in relation to the licence application in relation to Garth Brooks concerts. So it's something that can have immediate application. And we'll look, I mean, this week we will be guillotining a number of bills already, different kind of legislation that we've cooperated with government on. So it's not beyond the capacity of the Oireachtas to pass emergency legislation if necessary.
Thank you.
And also to give a clear signal that in the economic circumstances we are in, that we do need to engage with major economic projects of this kind in a hands-on way. I mean, I understand there was no oral meetings with residents. We learn in some news media that some of the objections were forged. Apparently, I'm not saying all of them, there's legitimate objections. Some of the talks that took place, for example, resulted in significant concessions about no concerts next year, which would have been a significant win for residents who had objections to this series of concerts.
Thank you.
So very meaningful efforts were made by some actors in this in trying to mediate a way through this. But ultimately, there's no point in everybody wringing their hands and saying it's terrible and it's a great embarrassment. Is anybody going to do anything about it? And can it be retrieved? Can it be rescued? And I would ask that the legislation that has been put forward, if you look at that, and we would support it in this House in terms of its passage, and get some advice on it. And we accept that it's open to amendment and change.
Well, I mean, when this problem arose here, obviously controversy began. It probably won't end now either. There may well be court implications out of that. But there were quite a number of people, Deputy, who made very valid suggestions from a common sense point of view as to how this might be sorted out. I mentioned in particular the chairman of the Labour Relations Commission, Kieran Mulvey, who went to enormous lengths to say, here is what you can actually do to make this happen and give those fans and all of that the opportunity to see an artist in whom they have a particular interest. But you see, you know this. if government decided to intervene here by emergency legislation, first of all, you'd be accused of doing down the rights of residents who have rights, of course. Secondly, you'd be accused of interfering on top of a planning process that the city council here have a duty and a responsibility to deal with. And so that's why I think it's necessary to look at these issues here. Now, when you say, is this for the immediate term now, even if you take Deputy Dooley's proposition and his bill, you're still bound, Deputy Martin, to have a period of public consultation about an issue. It's not a case just of tomorrow saying introduce emergency legislation through the Dáil. On an issue like this, where such large numbers are involved, you do need to have a process of public consultation in order to get it right. And that's why I take the Deputy's best effort. But in respect of these issues here, the timeline, the deciding of the applications by the relevant planning authority, an appeals mechanism, that you put in place a system that actually works. Now, as I said, in this country, we've been renowned for the reception and the welcome for so many outdoor major events. And they've been going on for years, planned without any great difficulties, other than the usual failings where people might get into trouble on the fringes of those concerts. But you've had them in major GAA stadia, other locations around the country, all planned, all followed a process, and all exceptionally successful. In this case here, there were 3 earlier in the year, another planning for 3 further ones which were granted. That wasn't acceptable to the artist who wanted 5. Obviously, the cost involved in these things is enormous. But I do think we'll take your Deputy's observations. We'll look at the specific issues here, but it is not for decision this week. It's a case of putting in place a process that will work. That in this case of Croke Park, that this kind of problem won't arise again. I'm very disappointed that it hasn't happened and that it won't happen now. But it's a bitter economic lesson to have learned. But there are processes that have to be put in place that work. They work everywhere else. They should work here also.